Okay, hi everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to start by saying that all of us who are presenting tonight are parents and do have kids at home. So if you hear kids, I know most of you guys are parents, so please give us some grace in that. But I'll start by opening. Hi, thanks for coming, everyone. We're a group of foster parents from across the state. We have representation from Anchorage, Northern, and the South Central regions. There are 5 of us who make up the board of Foster the Future Alaska, and we have many of you guys behind us, supporting us and communicating with us and helping us to move forward. We formed our group in the fall of 2022 in response to pressing need. And we're united by years of experience serving some of Alaska's most vulnerable youth and a strong desire to work towards child-centered legislative and policy change. We've spent many hours dedicated to intense research, focused conversation, community and legislative outreach. We've met with child mental health and attachment professionals, the family coordinator from the commissioner's office, legislators, former foster youth, current foster parents, and the Office of Children's Services management team. We have been met with an encouraging level of legislative receptivity and community support, as well as a sense of thankfulness from a lot of you guys, foster parents, from this community, who we feel is desperate for forward action. Our desire is to unite foster parents together to advocate for changes that bring the focus of child welfare onto the child, as we believe their needs should be paramount. We hope to bring foster parents to the table as members of the team and as advocates, promoting the stability and well-being of foster youth, particularly in the formative years of 0 to 10. We're really thankful that you guys are all here today. We do understand and appreciate the nuances and difficulties that are within every single child welfare case, every single case that enters the foster care system. We hope to offer another perspective, as well as ideas and strategies from our unique perspective. So I'm going to be sharing my screen, and without further ado.
Thank you so much, Destiny. My name's Andrea, and I am currently chairing our board of Foster the Future Alaska. We just want to thank you guys all for taking a few minutes out of your busy evenings and joining us for this presentation. A quick note before we begin. This will be the, I believe, 3rd time we've offered this presentation before an audience, and it is a heavy presentation. The data and commentary received from Alaska's resource families paint a discouraging picture of our state's child welfare system. You'll get glimpses of raw, hurting families fighting just a bit longer for the children they love and care for, and as such, we recognize this could be an emotionally charged evening, and if we're not careful, potentially polarizing. At a time when it's imperative we work together toward positive change, we just remind you and ask that every individual present be kind and respectful to each other, quick to listen and slow to speak. A board member will be moderating the chat window through the presentation. We ask that you drop any questions you may have there, and we'll go through as many as time will allow for at the end. Going to our first slide. The state of Alaska experienced a 25% drop in OCS licensed non-child specific foster and foster group homes from calendar year 2018 to 2022 per statistics available on the Office of Children's Services website. These year totals include any home in this category that was licensed for even one day of that year. While we're aware that the calendar year 2023's number will be higher than our currently licensed 700 homes, data trends do seem to indicate there will be another probable drop this year. In May of this year, Foster the Future Alaska published a resource family retention survey exploring the relationship between resource families and the Office of Children's Services, as well as looking at barriers or challenges resource families encounter in caring for Alaska's youth in foster care. Participation was excellent, with 137 current or former Alaskan licensed resource families taking time to thoroughly share their experiences with us, All 5 OCS regions of Alaska were represented as broken down in the chart displayed. While not a scientific survey, you will see very clear trends develop as we review the data and shared narratives over the next few minutes together. We hope this information will be a foundation for further conversation, healthy system for everyone, but ultimately for the children the system exists to benefit. We started by asking currently licensed respondents to share their future licensing intentions. We found of the currently licensed resource families, 35% intend to renew their licenses, 29% intend to close their licenses upon the end of their current cases, 30% are unsure, and 9% are unable to renew their licenses due to home capacity or recent regulation changes. If you do the math, the percentages add up to slightly more than 100, as 3 out of the 112 respondents to this question selected more than one answer. We'd like to draw your focus to the around 65% of participating resource families that intend to close their licenses, are unable to renew their licenses, or are currently unsure. These numbers could indicate there will be a continued severe drop in resource families over the next several years, and Alaska just doesn't have the margin for that. Our survey primarily consisted of a carefully chosen set of statements. We asked participants to select how much they agreed or disagreed with. You may have noticed that most of the following statements begin with "I feel." An individual's perception of a situation or experience will be influential in their future decisions. If we're to problem solve, we need to meet people where they're at and go forward from there. Our first statement read, "I feel I am a respected member of my foster children's care team." 35.3% agreed, 41.2% disagreed, while 23.5% remained neutral. Following are a selection of the 89 responses we received for this statement.
Hi, Chuck.
And just as a reminder, if you have your mute or your mic unmuted, if you just take a second to go ahead and mute that.
Despite being our foster children's acting parents for nearly 3.5 years, we were still just foster parents. Most of the time we were interacted with respectfully, but we were definitely lesser members of their care team, which didn't feel befitting the relationship we had with our foster children after so many years, the people who knew them and loved them as only parents could. We were disregarded in every thought, communication, or concern. I was told by the facilitator in our TDM, foster parents are not a legal party, and so you do not get to weigh in on these decisions. We were regarded as a babysitter with little regard for the best interest of the child. We walked into our foster child's TDM and decisions had obviously already been made without ever even hearing what it might do to the child. I am ignored unless they want me to do something for them.
As a side note before we continue, as we're more focused on correcting what isn't going well, the comments we're highlighting will tend to be those that illustrate current struggles resource families face. That said, we received close to 900 additional comments that we want to give full weight to, as well as not give the appearance that we cherry-picked or misrepresented the greater voice. So we went ahead and compiled the comments by category and heavily redacted, potentially identifying information such as names, locations, or specific situations in order to protect the privacy of our respondents. And those are available for viewing. If you would like to reach out to us after the presentation, we'd be happy to share those with you. And finally, the views in these comments are the views and opinions expressed in the comments are those of their authors and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of Foster the Future Alaska. Our second statement read, I feel my input as my foster children's primary caregiver is heard, valued, and meaningfully considered by those managing my foster children's cases. 25.5% agreed, 46.7% disagreed, while 27.7% remained neutral. We received 85 additional comments. Here are a few of them.
Our input has been considered very minimally, despite being the only people on the team who know the kids. We've never been validated by anyone, never been encouraged to share thoughts, opinions, or feelings in 7 years, not once. In some cases, we are heard, but it's definitely not valued or considered. My opinion was less important than anyone else's. Sometimes the caseworker who hadn't seen the child in months was considered more of an expert. I think for the most part, we are little more than babysitters to OCS. I don't think they value our opinions or want to hear from us. Part of that is because they are too busy, so even a phone call to check in is a waste of their time, or they simply can't manage it. Their team will accept my information, and as long as it doesn't conflict with 1 million other things, they will apply it where it can be applied. They will hear it. I don't think it impacts anything.
Statement number 3. I feel I can respectfully advocate for what I believe to be my foster children's best interest, whether in agreement or disagreement with OCS, without fear of any level of retaliation from the same agency. 27.7% agreed, 57% disagreed, while 15.3% remained neutral. 77 additional comments were received, and here are some of them.
I have seen some shady stuff. OCS trying to remove pre-adoptive kids, even making things up trying to remove biological kids in retaliation. Speaking up isn't worth messing up my kids' lives. There's too much of an imbalanced power dynamic. They, OCS, hold all the cards, my foster children. I've heard enough worrisome stories from others that I would have to think carefully before rocking the boat. OCS has often shown they will turn on you if you have a different opinion. They are quick to remind you that you are a roof and a bed and have no legal standing. But when they need us, we're gold to them. The worker has said she will find a new home for my foster child if I don't agree. The use of manipulation and intimidation is frequent, to say the least. I have experienced abusive treatment from social workers too many times. I have lost all hope that foster parents can be treated with respect and fairness.
Statement number 4. If I have concerns about how my foster children's cases are being managed, I feel safe addressing them without fear of reprisal. 22.6% agreed, 59.9% disagreed, while 17.5% remained neutral. 65 individuals shared more with us.
I am not confident in addressing them. There is a legitimate fear that children will be moved from homes for disagreeing with caseworkers. It could be said we don't support the plan, etc. If you express your opinion too strongly in opposition of an OCS worker, you will typically start to lose your privilege to the case. You will stop being told when court appearances are, not be privy to upcoming changes, or be told you're not a legal party in order to avoid keeping you in the loop on what will happen next. I don't feel safe addressing any concerns because I've had it happen several times where a professional team member shares something I've said to the person who I was concerned about. I also just don't feel comfortable arguing with a worker because I know they retaliate. A complaint on a caseworker does nothing but make your life miserable. Stick with them long enough and they'll move on anyway, and you'll get one hopefully easier to deal with the next time. The grievance process is dealt with directly by the caseworker's supervisor and then their manager. This makes retaliation the standard. Grievances should always be managed by a third party. There is no one to raise these concerns with that isn't already up to their eyeballs in work and resentful of more work.
Statement number 5. I feel the wellness of myself and my family is given consideration by OCS as they are reasonably and legally able. 19.7% agreed, 62.8% disagreed, while 17.5% remained neutral. We received 64 optional comments. Here are a few of them.
Children are removed from your home and placed with family, given only a day or two notice, sometimes even just a couple hours. This does not give consideration to the relationships they have built with their foster family and other children in the home, or giving the other children the ability to say goodbye. Maybe in smaller day-to-day ways like visit coordination and whatnot, but in the end, we were just an expendable resource. Our licensing worker reached out a few times after the traumatic loss of the foster children we had cared for since birth. Her empathy and compassion was appreciated, but we would rather have had the department recognize us not as just a resource to use up as it suits them, but as a family, including biological children that had sacrificed day in and day out for the foster children we loved so much. We are not just a means to an end. The mental and emotional health of our family is deserving of consideration too. Lack of notice on moving children, last-minute requests, not providing for safety of foster parents and family by ignoring. OCS can barely take care of the kids in custody, much less worry about foster families. Was stalked into a parking garage by an angry father and nothing was done about it. There's zero support for the well-being of resource families, absolutely zero. If it doesn't affect the caseload in a way that helps the system, it is ignored. Absolutely not the case. We have felt used and ignored.
This statement received both the least agreement and the most disagreement of any in this survey. Statement number 6. I feel there are effective systems of accountability within the Office of Children's Services and/or provided by the Department of Family and Community Services and the Alaska court system to ensure a healthy child welfare system in our state. Only 8.8% agreed, 75.1% disagreed, while 16.1% remained neutral. We received 63 expanded responses. Here are a few of them.
The same supervisors respond to complaints in the office being complained about. There is no outside office with fair impartiality. Fosters are the only party not represented in court or the entire process. There can be no accountability when OCS cannot properly train and retain employees. They don't have the luxury of firing employees when they fail to meet the standard of care for children or even safety. They begin to operate outside of the regulations and outside of what is the prudence of care because they either don't have the time or know the department doesn't have the ability to replace them at the time. There is no accountability for OCS. The things at least the Northern Region office gets away with are criminal. I have no reason to believe that there is any accountability for OCS. In the past, I've attempted to bring concerns through their grievance process, and it resulted in a meeting where a whole group of people accused me of things that never happened and offered no evidence or justification for their claims. Essentially, it was an effort to bully and intimidate me into submitting to their corrupt system. They do their own grievances. Need I say more? Court dates are frequently postponed due to paperwork not being completed in a timely manner. No one seems to speak up in court to keep the case moving forward. I have had caseworker and GALs confirm that they use federal guidelines as a timeline instead of deadline, meaning they do not strive to move cases forward quicker when appropriate. Often, updates are requested prior to hearings from multiple members of the team. And if a member of the team is not able to reach me prior to a hearing, inaccurate information is provided about the child during the hearing, misrepresenting the child's progress or lack of. Despite speaking with team members about discrepancies, nothing tends to be done. The department is short-staffed and more willing to turn a blind eye to mistakes made by their workers. Even when you prove retaliation has occurred, the worst thing that can happen is the worker is removed from the case. These people remain employed and can easily harm other families due to staffing shortages. OCS answers to no one. Filed a case with ombudsman. They ruled against OCS in all areas. Changes nothing. In the many placements I have had, I have not seen any real accountability take place for the negligent OCS staff. The best you can do is CC the supervisor or GAL on an email and pray for the best.
Statement number 7. I feel the Office of Children's Services consistently communicates with me in such a manner that I am able to effectively care for my foster children with reasonable timeliness. 16% agreed, 67.8% disagreed, while 16.1% remained neutral. Digging into that previous question a little bit more, we asked for the following question: please consider the caseworkers you work with currently. If you do not currently have placements, please consider your most recent experience. If you're not able to reach your foster children's caseworker immediately, how many days on average will pass before your call is returned? If you want to go to the next slide. We found 33.7% answered 1 to 3 days, 21.3% answered 4 to 7 days, 14.6% 7 to 14 days, 12.4% answered 14 to 29 days, while 18% replied 30 or never. Here are a few of the 74 comments we received on the issue.
OCS not only fails to communicate with foster parents, but they fail to regularly update ORCA notes and submit paperwork to the court in a timely manner. This contributes to the inability to terminate in a timely manner, keep their replacement informed, keep the court informed, and keep the foster parent informed on what's happening in the child's case. Caseworkers simply do not have the time to respond to foster parent questions or needs. They only have the time to put out fires. Their caseloads are too high, their workload is too much, and what they're expected to do is simply unrealistic for what is placed on them. Emails are often not returned. I find myself waiting to go up the chain of command for confirmation of basic requests such as travel. Depends on the social worker. I have had many medical appointments delayed over the years because OCS wouldn't respond to requests for signatures. Medical providers and school staff almost always report that they can't get any response from OCS. The overworked staff and continuous revolving door of caseworkers has made continuity of care impossible.
Statement number 8. I feel the Office of Children's Services communicates with consistent integrity with myself and others involved in my foster children's cases. 19.7% agreed, 55.5% disagreed, while 24.8% remained neutral. We received 46 additional comments.
I feel I see, most frequently during court appearances and TDMs, caseworkers and even GALs consistently lie to judges and moderators, and even parents, in order to achieve the desired result. GALs will say that things are going smoothly after reunification, or caseworkers will say they have no concerns, when in fact, multiple reports of harm have been filed. At this point, it seems that the system is at such a breakdown that caseworkers are valuing their caseload over the safety of children. Speaking the truth would result in children coming back into care, or proving that they did not do their due diligence in the case and in the reunification process, and therefore showing that there was a breach of duty along the way and that it was their fault. They care about getting kids off their caseload, their reunification numbers, etc. Unsafe reunifications with no follow-up happen all the time. Not enough workers for any reunifications to have the follow-up they require. I don't even know how to answer this. The mind games I have had to play to navigate the lies and manipulation of workers. There is almost no trust that they are telling you the truth. Look, they need to place kids, I get that, but they will tell the bare minimum to get people to agree. And then they talk around the truth of the case and where it's really at to get people to keep placement. It often feels like the workers are just covering their own butts, and at this point, I don't trust that we won't be thrown under the bus in some way by a worker.
Statement 9. I consistently receive advance notice of court hearings involving foster children placed in my home. 23.5% agreed, 61.8% disagreed, while 14.7% remained neutral. Statement 10. Thinking back to the last time a child was transitioned out of your care to a kinship placement when a court order or an emergent safety concern were not factors, how much notice were you and the children in your care given prior to the removal? Over a third of respondents that answered this question stated they had less than 24 hours notice prior to removal, with more than an additional third saying they had fewer than 7 days. Here are a few of their stories.
Our last transition was abrupt, and for a child with attachment disorders. Despite our efforts to ease the child into the transition, we ended up having no option but to drop him with a complete stranger, his new placement, at the airport. They say, oh, here's the flight date and time. Flight be the next day. Can't even wash clothes in that time. Then they wonder why kids fight and cry and be problems to the next family. Elders say, let kids be happy where they are. We were told that there would be multiple supervised visitations. 0 occurred. They were just taken away. Only with our first case were we told the children would be transitioning slowly. All others were under 24 hours, once on Christmas Eve. Our job is to love and help heal these children, and all we are doing is causing more trauma to already traumatized children when they are ripped from our home with no transition. No transition periods are given, and if we request them, we aren't a legal party and it doesn't matter. I have been told at 5 p.m. to have kids packed and ready to go at 8 a.m. the following morning. I had less than 30 minutes to meet family and transition a child. It was awful. 48 hours, 36 hours, 72 hours in my last 3 cases. We averaged 36 to 48 hours. Broke my kids' hearts. My kids lost a beloved sibling in just 48 hours, and we never were allowed to have contact again. Children are removed from your home and placed with family, given only a day or 2 notice, sometimes even just a couple hours. This does not give consideration to the relationships they have built with their foster family and other children in the home, or give the other children the ability to say goodbye. In my last TDM, all parties waived the 10-day notice, and the child was moved in 48 hours to kin. My sons were out of town for a sports event and were not given the opportunity to say goodbye to the child properly due to rushing that move. We should be given 10 days transition time if desired as well.
Statement 11. The monthly reimbursement stipend adequately provides for my foster children's needs and associated expenses. 30.1% agreed, 50% disagreed, while 19.9% remain neutral. Statement 12. I feel I've been provided with adequate support and resources to meet my foster children's needs in a reasonable and timely manner. 23.4% agreed, 53.2% disagreed, while 23.4% remain neutral. We then asked, if not, what supports and resources weren't available or weren't provided. Some of the respondents commented that there were supports, they just hadn't been made aware of them, so another communication issue. We believe that OCS has been trying to make some changes in this area. There were also issues with timely caseworker follow-through. We've gone ahead and highlighted a few of the comments that fell outside of these 2 issues.
We are currently receiving a stipend that covers expenses, but spent 1 year and 3 months bleeding our personal savings with special needs kids that required a lot of time, transport, materials. All waiver supports and private duty nursing are severely understaffed and not available to the kids in my care. Transportation, respite, therapy, counseling for resource family. Childcare. I have a special needs kiddo and it took over a year to find consistent, reliable childcare. I nearly lost my job because of it. Stipends do not cover food and clothing in the current economy. It is a financial burden to care for foster kiddos and requires I work extra hours to provide. I have been the one to track down resources for each of our placements and to fight to get medical needs taken care of.
Statement 13. I feel I've been able to easily secure needed medical and mental health services for the children in my care. 42.7% agreed, 42.6% disagreed, while 14.7% remained neutral. We then invited participants to share with us which specific obstacles they've encountered in acquiring these needed services and received 61 comments. Here are several of them.
My medically fragile child who has an abandonment case has been unable to receive appropriate medical care due to lack of communication from the department and delays in filing affidavits by AAG. Surgeries have been delayed multiple times. Lack of providers was a problem, but also communication issues, as many services required some movement on OCS's end and they were unresponsive. Consent for surgery. Parents did not consent twice, and then the worker finally got approval from the court. Meanwhile, his teeth were rotting out of his mouth. long wait lists for available providers, special funding approval, and the time it takes. We're still waiting. Always communication issues. Foster parents don't have the legal rights or resources available to enroll foster children into services and or make major medical decisions. Unfortunately, due to lack of involvement from parents and lack of time from caseworkers, children's medical needs go unmet for a prolonged period of time. There aren't many child psychologists, mental health providers in our area that I'm aware of, even fewer that accept Denali Kid Care. Waitlists are long. Funding for non-Medicaid covered therapists is somewhat of a struggle to come by. It shouldn't be that way. Every child that comes into care should have ready, regular access to a mental health professional, Medicaid covered or not. Folks aren't taking Denali Kid Care. Waits are long and approval from OCS can just not come after months of work.
Statement 14. I feel that at a systemic level, federal law, state statute, and department policy, a child's physical and psychological well-being are primary considerations in their China proceedings. 14% agreed, 64% disagreed, while 22.1% remained neutral. 58 individuals chose to share further. Most of their comment topics seem to fall within the following 4 categories. The Indian Child Welfare Act was the most commonly shared response. Many respondents felt that a child's rights and well-being are often considered secondary to those of the biological parents. For example, parents being given every extra chance, repeatedly lengthening a child's time in foster care. Third, often related, we saw not keeping to the federal time guidelines, case extensions being given out without consideration of a child's well-being, such as permanency and stability, or failure to progress cases in a timely manner. And lastly, respondents thought a child's bonds and attachment should matter. They would like legal recognition, for example, fictive kinship status, after having cared for a child for a significant period of time.
The biological parents' rights are always prioritized over the children's rights to a safe childhood. They are often returned to their parents because OCS wants to give the parents another chance, not taking into consideration the toll abuse has already taken on the child. Parents first before what a child needs isn't always the best policy. Whole families is the goal, but not if it means a child is hurt or continues going without permanency for years. If ICWA placements cannot be implemented initially or very soon into a case, a child's right to permanency and stability and their individual well-being should be prioritized over later ICWA placement compliance. Children are not property. An extended family member a kid has never met shouldn't have more ability to adopt than someone who has cared for them for years, their whole life. Children's bonds need to matter. I see most often in ICWA cases that parents who have exhibited minimal to zero involvement are continually extended time beyond the prudent and legal timeframes to make efforts. This results in children staying in care for a more than acceptable time frame and then being looked over for adoption due to race. I have a child who's been in custody 4 years with continued talk of reunification and active efforts. The policy is 18 months. Extension of custody supervision hearing, page 210 in the OCS manual, needs to be rewritten to implement more accountability. It has been my experience that these extensions of custody are given out too liberally at the expense of the child's stability and well-being. ICWA is a tough cookie. It needs to be modernized.
Statement 15. I feel I am able to make a positive and enduring difference in the lives of children I care for as a foster parent. This statement received by leaps and bounds the highest level of agreement among our participants, with 79.5% agreeing, 6.5% disagreeing, and 13.9% remaining neutral. We received 58 additional comments.
This is complicated to answer. On one hand, yes, our love and care and modeling of healthy relationships can go so far, given ample time and opportunity. But also, our family has been an unwilling partner in inflicting needless trauma on children through forced severing of relationships. I feel like we have the ability to help children, but often the system stands in the way of real and true progress in the children we care for, unfortunately. I do agree with this only because I do think that it is powerful for children to see a functional family for any period of time. However, I do believe OCS forces foster parents to be a traumatic piece of their story by not allowing for adequate transition periods and reunifying too early or without consideration of current family bonding between foster youth and their foster family. Therefore, I selected neutral. We've deeply loved every one of the 9 children who've passed through our doors. We're great parents, foster and adoptive, just tired of dealing with OCS. Though the department fights us at every turn, the kids' time in our home does show them what a safe and healthy family looks like. Therefore, I chose neutral. I would have written strongly agree, but as much as I wish this was solely dependent on me, OCS has stood in the way before. OCS is so determined to continue functioning in a harmful manner that it's becoming less likely foster parents can or will act as a buffer between the child and OCS.
Statement 16. Based on my experiences, I would recommend becoming a licensed resource family within Alaska to my friends and family. 23.3% agreed, 49.7% disagreed, while 27% remained neutral. Here are a few of the 84 additional comments we received.
I could not, in good conscience, recommend becoming a resource family within our current system without at least sharing the good, bad, and ugly first. A family needs to know that they can expect no voice and no protection from the state or department. They need to understand the mental, emotional, and sometimes physical risks they'll be exposing their families to. It'd take a very clear calling in one's life to be willing to step into this role. Absolutely not. I will do everything in my power to discourage people from getting involved. OCS only spreads trauma. Any family that gets involved must be willing to sacrifice their own children and their own hearts. My experience with the children makes me want to foster. My experience with OCS prioritizing parent wants over the needs of children makes me want to scream. The system is pure chaos. We love the kids, but the meetings, disruptions, approvals for things, lack of communication, wait times, it's too much for most people. Had I known what I know now, I don't think I would have put my family through the hell of trying to work with OCS. Working with them is like being in a toxic, abusive relationship. OCS is a failed system from the ground up. OCS leadership does not have the right vision for OCS. I am one of the most pro-family foster parents you'll ever meet. However, even in Mike Dunleavy's foster parent proclamation states, whereas foster parents, including kinship caregivers, face immense challenges, but they display selfless courage and provide safe environments for vulnerable children, dated May 1st, 2023. This statement portrays the governor's idea of foster care to me. It contradicts direct words spoke by OCS leadership during a live forum. I can't in good conscience encourage others to dive into a world that can't really come together for the best interest of those we are promising to keep safe. Kids need safe, loving homes. The system sucks, but the kids still need loving homes. Someone needs to put children first.
We compiled the results and sorted them by those that received the least amount of agreement. The lack of effective systems of accountability is a clearly held concern, followed by the failure of existing laws, statutes, and policies to prioritize a child's physical and psychological well-being and communication barriers in being able to effectively care for children. And this shows the remaining 2. We then sorted areas of concern by ownership, as we understand some of the needed changes will happen at a policy level and some at a legislative level. On July 19th, we met with the Office of Children's Services Executive Leadership Team to share this exact presentation and to make formal policy change requests. The following slides will address those. The first area we addressed was that of placement changes and transitions. We divided our requests into 3 workable steps. To begin, we requested immediate implementation of the existing policies and procedures listed on the slide. These provide 2 weeks of advance notice of impending placement changes, as well as acknowledgement, support, and services to help the child and caregiver prepare emotionally for the transition. As a reminder, per our survey, 1 in 3 of our survey respondents that experienced change of placement to kinship received fewer than 24 hours notice, and another 1 in 3 received fewer than 7 days notice. Secondly, we requested CPS 3.6.1 Policy D1 be amended to give resource families equal right to either enforce or waive the 10-day notice requirement, similar to other interested parties. Just looking at the logistical side, many times resource families need to wash worn clothing and pack multiple years' worth of a child's belongings. And in consideration of the child, 10 days notice would give a little more time to say goodbye to their foster grandparents and cousins, get in another therapy appointment or 2 to help process what's happening, and have that play date that's been planned. Advocates.org states, once the child attaches to a caregiver and that caregiver has become the psychological parent, it is crucial that the transition from the caregiver's home be as emotionally protective as possible. Poorly executed or improperly timed transitions may adversely impact a child's healthy development, as well as the child's continuing capacity to attach to others. Therefore, we requested the implementation of incremental, developmentally appropriate transition plans as designed and guided by a child's own therapist, psychologist, pediatrician, or occupational therapist for the purpose of mitigating further trauma to the child, or if none is available, OCS may employ and utilize their own child psychologist who must meet with the child prior to designing the transition plan if age allows. And lastly, we requested standardized, developmentally appropriate transition policies drafted by pediatric mental health clinicians in accordance with research-backed best practices. We next looked at the topic of accountability within the child welfare system, specifically the grievance procedure that is currently available to resource families, as well as the parameter of what the grievance procedure may be used for. As resource families are undeniably invested in the well-being of the children in their care, and as invested parties with no rights, meaningful voice, or legal standing, a clear imbalance of power exists within the relationship between resource families and OCS. Therefore, it is imperative that effective systems of accountability and sufficient oversight exist to protect resource families from abuses of power. As evidenced through both our survey data and personal testimony of resource families, the current grievance process and/or implementation is just not adequate to provide effective accountability within the department or felt safety among resource families. Just as a spouse or a close family member cannot offer truly adequate accountability or discipline, given the duality of the relationship, we feel this also applies to veritable peer discipline within OCS. Therefore, we requested the formal grievance procedure be transferred outside the Office of Children's Services. We proposed a grievance department be created within DFCS and used for the Division of Juvenile Justice, the Alaska Psychiatric Institute, Alaska Pioneer Homes, and the Office of Children's Services. While we understand that this solution was outside of OCS's immediate ability, we requested that they initiate and support such a transfer. We requested it be moved in its entirety to provide oversight and record from the grievance's initiation. Just as importantly, there should exist an avenue for resource families as invested parties to elevate concerns of case handlings without fear of any level of retaliation. And so we requested that the grievance procedure parameters be broadened to include reviewing case management concerns held by the biological parents, resource families, OCS employees, or other concerned individuals. As fewer than 1 in 4 of our survey participants agreed with consistently receiving advance notice of court hearings involving foster children placed in their homes, we requested actual implementation of CPS 6.6.3 and Alaska Statute 4710-030, requiring the giving of written advance notice to foster families of all court hearings they are entitled to attend. A search of the phrase best interest in the combined CPS and CPS procedures manual returns no fewer than 180 results. It's a great sounding caveat phrase for child protection. And yet, when we ask survey participants if they felt that a child's physical and psychological well-being are primary considerations in China proceedings at a systemic level, including department policy, only 14% agreed. As further affirmation, we urged OCS to review the dismal mental and behavioral health statistics that exist for both current and former foster youth. What we're doing currently just isn't working. We suggested that best interest of the child needs to either be carefully defined within individual department policies and state statutes by those qualified to offer such definitions and parameters, or medical and mental health professionals need to be an integral part of every China case from its initiation. We suggested that many of those directly managing or influencing a child's case just simply do not have the educational or clinical backgrounds to make such best interest determinations. And the phrase may be both losing its value at best and perhaps covering for arbitrary decisions by OCS workers at worst. Along similar lines, we see from our survey results referencing medical and mental health, current procedures aren't working and children are not receiving the timely care they desperately need. Therefore, we requested OCS work with their medical and mental health team, along with resource family input, to identify care barriers and create new policies and procedures that ensure a child has adequate, timely access to medical and mental health care and supports, so far as the Office of Children's Services is responsible and able. The following are a few ideas that we believe would be helpful in caring for youth, particularly youth with higher medical needs. We suggested OCS expand the medical and mental health unit to include more nursing staff and paraprofessionals, provide education for caseworkers on looping in MMHU for foster youth with medical needs, create long-term medical consent for youth with chronic illnesses or who will be needing multiple procedures, create tiered consent structure based on urgency of need, emergent, urgent, and standard. Have the medical and mental health unit provide training to caseworkers on procedures for receiving and giving anesthesia and surgical consent, as well as medication consent, and establish specific guidelines and parameters about contact attempts with biological parents and a timeline for filing affidavits when consent is not received to avoid a delay of care for foster youth. We offered the Office of Children's Services the opportunity to respond publicly to the survey results, and they did. It's a bit long to share on a slide, so we'll have a board member drop a copy of Director Goy's response in the chat window for your review. On August 11th, Foster the Future Alaska's board members will be meeting with Commissioner Koval from the Department of Family and Community Services and Legislative Director Laura Steidoff, as well as Legislative Deputy Director Anna Lantham from the Office of the Governor. We are incredibly grateful to have the opportunity to share from a boots on the ground perspective challenge areas in Alaska's current child welfare system, as well as make policy and legislative requests. And to give some context to the following requests, we wanted to share some of our hearts with you. First of all, we firmly believe that children are, by design, meant to be raised within the nurturing care of their families. It is a tragedy when a family unit is fractured, even more so when it's dissolved, and we must do more as a state to come alongside families with real life-giving support. Secondly, we believe if a child must be brought into state custody, it is in a child's best interest to be placed within their extended family and community in most cases. This allows for the continuity of relationships, environment, and culture, and perhaps lends a stronger sense of stability to a child during a very uncertain time of their lives. We urge the state to put forth the resources to expedite and expand the family search process to ensure children are placed within their extended family either at the initiation of a case or shortly thereafter. And lastly, if a child is unable to return to their parents, we believe in honoring a child's attachments and bonds wherever they form them, so long as it is safe to do so. If a child has been living in a loving, stable foster home for years, we believe there is value in recognizing and respecting the psychological importance of the relationships they formed there. Children need a sense of stability and safety to thrive. Studies have repeatedly indicated there are compounding consequences to placement instability when a child is moved repeatedly. And while individual risk and protective factors may affect a child's resilience, we believe the bar for justifying even one move from a home a child has found love, relationship, and safety in should be set much higher than it currently is within our state. In Alaska, where nearly 1 in 3 children entering foster care are under 3 years of age, with 58% of those children being under a year, and where children spend an average of 25.5 months in care. These many times initial and primary attachments are not legally recognized or protected, and we'd like to see that change. In following with many other states around the nation, such as Alabama, Georgia, New York, Arizona, Missouri, Oklahoma, Illinois, and California, we call for prioritizing a child's developmental, emotional, and mental needs in Alaska. And so on August 11th, Foster the Future Alaska will bring the following policy and legislative requests before the Department of Family and Community Services and the Office of the Governor for consideration. Number one, we would like to see comprehensive records to be completed within 90 days of a child being removed from their home by the Office of Children's Services, with detailed reports of attempts being filed with the court for accountability purposes. We've modeled these after, I would have to look it up, it was Louisiana or Illinois' family searches. They are much more comprehensive and expanded than what we currently have in the state of Alaska, as well as offering the accountability feature of having exactly what's been done, the attempts to be filed with the court. Number two, we'd like to see a reduction of barrier crimes preventing kinship foster care licensure to those criminal offenses that are inconsistent with providing a safe and suitable home for children. Number three, we'd like to see increased support, financial and otherwise, to all kinship homes that receive placement of a child in the custody of the Office of Children's Services, whether licensed or not. If a child is in the home, the state must take the responsibility of making sure the child's needs are met. And lastly, in cases that are not subject to laws and placement preferences under the Indian Child Welfare Act for children under the age of 6 who have been cared for by their foster parents for more than 12 months, we ask that adoption or legal guardianship preference be given to their current placement, prioritizing a young child's stability, current attachments to their primary caregivers, and continuity of built family, home, and community. Our legislative requests have evolved as we've held conversations with stakeholders across the state and have been made aware of additional concerns, and we are open to hearing continued feedback as we try and shape solutions to best meet current needs for children in care. We'd like to close out our presentation by reading a final quote submitted to us, as it captures the foster family experience so fully and eloquently.
Until you are in the position of a foster parent, it's hard to understand what it's like. We pour our heart and soul into these kids. For what reason? For most of us, it is simply to help, to make a difference, and to see growth in children. Good foster parents exist, and so many of us are weeded out because our months and years of effort for these children can be simply turned right back around with one decision of a judge based on laws that may or may not make sense for the well-being of the child. We hold the babies that shake from drug withdrawal. We bathe the crystallized urine out of toddlers' hair and clean the feces and molded food off children's bodies when they enter our care. We fly for medical appointments. We are there when kids wake up from anesthesia. We sleep on the floor by beds. We advocate for referrals. We beg for appointments. We replenish wardrobes. We enroll in services, schools, and camps. We transport. We drive constantly. We cry, we hug, we encourage, and then we attend therapy to decompress from the case facts that are often too heavy to handle alone. And then one day we get a call. We have to pack up this child, this toddler, this baby, and we hand them over never to be spoken to again. Often, we know that they will be back in care. Often, we know that they will be right back to where they were before. And there is absolutely nothing we can do but pray for these babies, because the system is so broken and the case facts often trump the child's needs. And eventually we burn out, because doing good day after day after day, only to see that good immediately be undone, is exceptionally heartbreaking. Good foster parents exist, but they do not stay forever in a broken system because it is often just too heavy.
And now we'd love to continue the discussion with you, starting with any questions submitted through the chat feature. Kristen?